The concept of reparations to Black Americans has been debated in this country since the Civil War. Our guest today says the time is now, and the leader to get it done is none other than Donald Trump. Please join me in welcoming Thomas Redick, author of Time for Trump's Patriotic Reparations. Tom, thanks so much for being with us.
Well, thank you for having me. And as I've pointed out in my book, even though it seems bizarre to have Donald Trump give a big thing that blacks have always wanted when he's been basically the anti-DEI president, I came to this subject when I was hearing a session on Tulsa riot issues, 4 different sessions that covered this massive destruction of Greenwood in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And I told the professor at Hope who did this session, I said, I really think you should do a reparations session to follow up on this, because you said those people tried to go to court. They couldn't go to court. If you try to go to court and can't go to court, we let people get justice later because they were denied it. I went and did a presentation at Hope College because Fred was afraid of this. He said, I'm not going to touch this touchy subject. I like my job. I like my life. I'm not doing it. So I said, okay, Fred, I understand. But do you mind if I go ahead and try it? And so I did a 3-part series in one session of the blacks and the Native Americans and gay people who have actually got reparations up in Canada. So there's a basis for it. And I went ahead and took that YouTube video and shared it with my father, who was in a nursing home. And my father watched it 3 or 4 times, and he said, I love this session you did on this. You should totally write a book on this, Tom. And I like to do what my dad tells me. But in this case, it looked like I didn't feel I had the expertise. So I read every single book I could find on reparations, and some of them were really interesting. So it was a really fun time in my life to get to read everything about a very touchy subject that my good friend wouldn't touch. And I figured out as an attorney, there are issues, particularly with the Civil War, which has an ex post facto clause barring any recovery for that, and also with the problem of preemption of a federal law preempting a state, because California wrote a really bad commission report of 500 pages that proposed a law that would not even recover after 1910. I mean, they bit off more than they can chew, and I understand they're going to have to go back to the well and figure it out. But with Donald Trump looking at New York trying to do the same thing as California, and California and New York are not places that he, even though he lived in New York, he's not friends with the governor, let's say. Neither is Gavin Newsom a person he likes. So he could take a preemptive law, create a foundation, and for funding, you'd call it there was Barack Obama gave a $1.4 trillion stimulus when he rescued our economy, even though he wasn't an American citizen, according to Trump.
Right.
Donald Trump himself has thrown money around. I represented corn and soybean growers in America as an attorney, and they got a lot of money for the trade disruption that was caused. $15 billion just came out of nowhere and it's okay. If we need money, we can find it. And Donald has a good ability to find it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But you're talking about a cost here of $17 trillion, not even billion, but trillion.
Yes, there were studies that showed that. And that is why you need to have the ex post facto clause of the Constitution to cut that down to size. Also, I think when we fight a war and 600,000 or 700,000 people give their lives to stop slavery, and whatever anybody says, I've read every book about what was the cause of the Civil War. And there is no question in my mind, and there shouldn't be a question in anybody's mind, that war was fought to kill off an evil in America called slavery. Well, we have a war that cost a lot. We have an ex post facto clause that says, because the government of Britain tried to get us on things we did that were legal at the time, we are not going to have anybody ever do that again. And we really, if it was legal, they don't get to file a lawsuit against them. They don't get to recover anything. And I'm sorry, when it happened so long ago, there was a huge war to fight it. I don't think the $17 trillion of Civil War wages or pre-Civil War slavery wages is a recoverable amount. Since then, there's been plenty of things going on that like the Tulsa riot, like other lynching. I mean, I went down to the lynching monument in Birmingham, Alabama, and had another wake-up call of, wow, those people all should have something. So there's plenty to go around when you dig into what's happened in the last 150 years since the Civil War. And I don't think we really need to have a $17 trillion problem on our hands.
Good point. How do historical events like the Civil War and Reconstruction still affect that conversation today?
Well, they tried after the Civil War to give reparations, so it was something we wanted to do, and we did our best to try to do it. General Sherman had a 40 acres and a mule thing, and he gave a bunch of land that was swamp land to the freed slaves, and they quickly got rid of that. They tried to do things. They had a Freedmen's Bureau, which is the parallel to my foundation, right? That was so corrupt and so outrageous. I mean, you could write a whole book about just the Freedmen's Bureau. But it means we were involved in repairing the subject, and we just did a really bad job of it. That doesn't mean you don't want to do it right if you did a bad job back in the day.
Right.
And there was a gal, Callie House. She was a great character of saving up all her money to march around the country and recruit people to her cause of reparations. And she got jailed for lying because America said, no, we'd never do that, so you must be lying, and we're going to put you in jail for lying. A white guy named Vaughn did the same thing. Not as well, by the way, but he did try to do reparations. They didn't touch him. They just wanted to get the black gal in jail because she's uppity. So You've got stories like that just move this reparations thing forward from the Civil War to her in 1910, and then the Tulsa riot in 21. We had every time we went to war and frankly, blacks started fighting in this Revolutionary War, the Civil War, World War I, that was so controversial. They wanted rights when they got back. And we had what was called the Red Summer riot and killing people, the Greenwood problem of destroying an entire city and bombing them from the air. I mean, we have a lot to make up for here that happened, and, nobody went to court afterward to be able to recover, so they should be able to get something now.
Absolutely. And I understand, Tom, that polls show that a vast majority of blacks and even a majority of whites support the idea of reparations.
Yeah, you'll have to look at it as an evolving process. So every time they take a poll, the number grows. And if it keeps growing, like it's growing, you're going to have a majority of whites and almost every black by 2050 support the idea of reparations. So that's a good reason to create a foundation now and start looking at the question with a lot of money to correct problems that they see and keep funding it as a nonprofit that can collect, donations from people. If California wants to do reparations, give money to this big foundation, So the states could fund it, the cities could fund it, churches could fund it, all of them could get involved in it. And as I said, Trump may not appoint people you like at first. It might look like the old Freedmen's Bureau. But if people in the next generation see it as a necessary thing, they will appoint the right people to do the right things.
Good point. And speaking of churches, there are churches, universities, even foundations that are funding reparations initiatives. Do those initiatives conflict with possible federal action?
No, those are completely voluntary. It's Bush back in the day said there's 1,000 points of light, and we don't need to have the federal government involved in them. Right. And you can't actually stop them from doing that with a federal law. So they would keep doing what they're doing. They frankly might have a better luck doing what they're doing when they have the federal law preempting, states and cities and other folks from doing it. Because it would apply to a city. If Los Angeles wants to do reparations, they've looked hard and long and they've done some good work, frankly. They would have to genuflect in the general direction of the great government and work with whatever Trump sets up to make their job done. They've done a lot of good work in LA, though. They had a black beach that was destroyed in the 20s, and they restored it. So they are working on correcting their mistakes out in Los Angeles.
Interesting. And the whole concept of Donald Trump being the key player here, when a lot of people would say to themselves, boy, he'd be maybe the last guy, I'd think, that would be in support of reparations.
That's what makes it so ironic. It's just the timing. California has a bad law. New York has a bad law. Somebody should do a federal solution. That means if he doesn't get it done, the next people would have the same problem that they have to fix. So it isn't necessarily married to Donald Trump. But it is a way he could restore his history as a decent person after doing all these anti-DEI moves. I list a few of them in the book, and since I wrote the book, there have been even more. Yeah, he is the last person, but he's also the last person you'd ever expect to have the support of the Christian folks I know in Holland, Michigan. All these good Christians support Trump, right? Well, even though he is not, he's worse than Clinton on some of the moral issues, right? But they love that he is like the Persian king who came and helped them, and even though he wasn't the right faith. So I do think there's a precedent for him having the weird support of weird groups. It's not simple that he's never said a word about reparations. So it's clear he's not going to have any. I'm sorry, I got a spammer there. He's clearly not somebody who would do it until he sees the necessity of it. And what might happen is the economy might be so broken after what he does with it that he needs a stimulus, and he can direct it in that direction. And he'll give some to whites too, but he'll make sure the blacks get a foundation out of it.
Interesting. Boy, and love him or hate him, you have to admit that when he puts his mind to something, he's a force to be reckoned with.
Certainly, he's done big deals, and this is just the biggest deal of his life that he can do, and he can simply write a law. And Congress, this would be very bipartisan in Congress. It's clear if Trump got his base to say, yeah, we should do this to California and New York because we hate those guys, the Democrats would say, fine, throw us in the briar patch, bear rap,
Exactly.
Yeah, you're not going to have the Democrats have a problem with it.
Interesting. Tom, what is the one main takeaway you would hope that a reader gets from reading the book?
Well, that the process of reparations is an inevitability, that it is not something, even though it's not something you may have thought about before, and you may be alarmed to think, my white wealth is ill-gotten gains. What? That is the big hurdle we all have to face. That yes, and Ta-Nehisi Coates did a really good article in the Atlantic that ripped that lid off of that. So I am a lawyer who, because I owned a house in a very white neighborhood, got massive appreciation in California and in St. Louis. And that is wealth that I accumulated because of my whiteness. I had black friends in a church network. We went and watched Selma. And they would say, why can't we get into Clayton, Missouri? What is happening there? I said, the brokers are in conspiracy and they have clever ways to keep you out. Mm-hmm. So the wealth thing and gap in America is a 10-to-1 problem that we've never even looked at. What could we do to help fix that? Because it clearly causes disorder in our society that we have not dealt with the problem of reparations.
Boy, a most intriguing concept. It really is. And so enjoyed our discussion, Tom. I wish we had hours and hours to continue because it's such an intriguing topic. Time for Trump's Patriotic Reparations, written by Thomas Redick. And I assume the book is available on Amazon and everywhere fine books are sold?
Yeah, Barnes & Noble and even Australia and UK, they've got bookstores selling it. So it's out there for people to buy and only $14 on Amazon. So it's in paperback form, so I'm not selling some. I've always marketed a pricey hardback at first, and I have to apologize to my friends that they can't afford it. So this one's not that. This is ready to go. So
Excellent. Tom, thanks so much for being with us today.
thank you. I appreciate a chance to talk about this. It's as interesting to me as it is to you, and I really love talking about it. So thank you for taking me.
Wonderful. Thanks so much.